All right, King. I'm very excited about this week's guest because as a child, I was terrified of this man on WWE television, but he is one of my all time favorites in the ring. And you two share some out of the ring attributes as well. We're going to get into that. He is a former WWE champion, a man with a long career in professional wrestling, intertwining with your career, King. Also a USWA champion. We're going to talk about that in Memphis. He is Glenn Jacobs, known to everybody as Kane. Glenn, how are you today?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Well, Glenn, I'm so excited for you to be here today, but I want to get something out of the way early as I want to apologize. I told Glenn Moore, my co-host on this, when I got started doing this podcast, I said, look, I don't want to call my friends up and put them under the gun and ask them to be on the podcast, and because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and that sort of thing. And I just didn't, because I've been on podcasts before where it did take a lot of time and a lot of effort, and I wasn't really thrilled about doing it. So when somebody does agree to come on, I really do appreciate it. So I want to tell you, Glenn, that anytime you want to say, hey, I've had enough, Jerry, just let me know. But thank you so much for being on here today.
Well, I appreciate it. And, it's a long way from being your dentist. I'll tell you that. I'm a lot happy about that.
Man, let me go. Speaking of that, before we even mention the name of my dentist, because you're going to have to help me a lot with my memory on this stuff. But how far back do you and I go? I mean, I think we had one of your first matches was against me, wasn't it?
I think it was. I want to say that was 1991, maybe 1992.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was another infamous.
Yeah, I know, and I know you don't like to talk about that. I think that was my son. My son Kevin was just kind of getting into the. He got this wild hair and some kind of crazy notion that he wanted to be the next Vince McMahon, and so he was going to start promoting wrestling shows down here in the Memphis area. And I don't think I'd even met you. How did Kevin get you booked on that show?
Yeah, so actually, the first time I was down in Memphis for TV, we were me and another guy, and I can't even remember his name at this point. It was so long ago, and we haven't kept in touch. But we were like the Russian Olympic champions or something like that. And
of course,
came in and did a couple shots, for you guys, and that's how Kevin met me. And then he calls me later, and this is December, and he's got this idea for an evil Christmas character, the Christmas creature.
Man, look at that Christmas creature. He gets the 1, 2, 3. He just picked Trey Keller up by his throat and slammed him down in there. He's looked totally awesome in this now. He took care of Trey Keller and got the 1, 2, 3.
He is huge. There's no doubt about it. Prentice was yelling during the movie. Yeah, tell Jerry Lawler about him. I guarantee you Jerry Lawler knows about him. This guy is huge. He comes in all decked out in red, white, and green with the tinsel wrapped around, including the mask. They call him the Christmas creature. But I tell you what, he may be dressed in Christmas colors, but he is certainly not having.
And the thing is, it's funny because I had these gimmicks, and we've all had them through the years. But for some reason, everybody always likes to talk about my old gimmicks, probably because they weren't very good. And I always want to say, I did a lot of stuff after that was really good, But the early on stuff, not so much. But anyway, yeah. So my mom made me this costume, and. With garland.
Hang on. Glenn, you said your mom actually made that?
Yeah, my mom made the costume. She sure did.
Oh, my gosh. See, I had no idea that. I thought that was some kind of crazy concoction that Kevin had come up with. And I've always held that against him.
Kevin designed it. My mom made it. But Kevin did design it. But it even had like flashing. I mean, it was way ahead of its time. It even had flashing lights with a battery pack in and the whole thing.
You were way ahead of Chris Jericho on that, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. It didn't quite have the success of Jericho, but it was way ahead of him technologically.
Well, Kevin would come up with these. He was actually a good guy as far as thinking up gimmicks. I'll never forget one time he brought me to my house. He brought me this big folder, this big, almost like a, I don't know, this big book of pictures. And Kevin's a pretty good artist as well. And so he had drawn up all of these crazy characters. And I mean, there must have been 100 of them in there. And he wanted me to take it to Vince McMahon. And you know, it was like he that was his specialty. He could come up with characters. And I actually did take it and give it to somebody in the WWE at the time. And nothing really ever came of it. I mean, I think they sent it back and said, we're really not interested. But then somehow, surreptitiously, and not long later, the ringmaster showed up in the WWE, and that was one of the characters that Kevin had created in the book. But he never got any recognition or any monetary thing for it or whatever.
Poor Kevin, just like the Christmas creature never quite caught up to Y2J, the ringmaster never quite caught up to Stone Cold Steve Austin. So
right, you're right.
Poor guy. But yeah, our first match, I think it was in Kennett, Missouri, you and me, and I remember Frank Morrell coming across. I think it was Frank, coming over to the bad guys' locker room and telling me what you wanted to do. And I had no idea what he was talking about. I was so green, I didn't even know the terms that he was using. So you were lucky just to survive that one, man.
And see, I've been under the impression all of this time, since that was the first time I remember seeing you, was in Missouri. I thought you were from Missouri, but you weren't.
I was,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, you really
I am.
were?
I grew up near Hannibal, Missouri. A couple hours north of St. Louis. So yeah, man, I would drive down for TV in Memphis. That was about a 5 or 6 hour drive. I'd get up, at 1 or 2 in the morning and drive down to do TV at was that Channel 5?
Yeah, Channel 5.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the things that that's one of the things that a lot of times the fans don't realize is, what guys put into trying to get, when you try to get started in this business, you do things just to get booked anywhere. Like you said, what do you get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and drive 5 hours just to be on maybe a 5 or 10 minute match on Memphis TV, right?
Exactly. Yeah. 'Cause it's all about getting experience and, getting exposure. Of course, again, I wasn't very good at that point, so it's probably lucky that I wasn't getting a whole lot of exposure, but the experience was great. I mean, I got to work with people like you, Bill Dundee, Dutch Mantell, who helped me a lot throughout my career. Of course, Dutch was there as well. So some of the people that I got to meet and the experience of just being around folks like you all really helped me a lot.
And then did you go from us? Is that when you went to Smoky Mountain? Was that the first place that you really kind of got established?
I actually went to Puerto Rico. Dutch got me a job with Carlos, and I was there for 9 months from, I guess it was the winter of 1993 through that year. And that might have been 94, I'm sorry. And then after that, I went to Smoky Mountain in the 1995, in December of 95.
And so, man, my memory is screwed up. So I started in WWE in 93. I could have sworn that you were there before me, but you didn't come until 95 or so?
I didn't come, but I had a tryout. We rode together for one shot. I had a tryout up there. It was me and Sabu were having tryout matches, and I think we both may have ridden with you around the loop. It was upstate New York. I forget where all it was, but yeah. So I wasn't there. I'd had a tryout and didn't make it. They basically told me to come back later, and that's when I went to Puerto Rico and did the rest of the stuff.
Well, you mentioned Dutch Mantell. Dutch was booking down in Puerto Rico for Carlos Colon, and Dutch just doesn't get the credit that he deserves in this business. He was an outstanding worker. I mean, I had some of the greatest matches ever down in Memphis with Dutch Mantell, and then he went on to be a darn good booker down in Puerto Rico, and like you said, he helped a lot of guys out in this business. You included, right?
Sure did. He was a great booker in Puerto Rico because he really understood the psychology of that territory. And it was pretty amazing. We were very hot, especially for that time. I mean, Carlos Colon's TV wasn't his TV's always been, okay as far as, ratings wise, but it's trying to get people out to the matches, not so much all the time. And
Right.
Dutch was able to do that. I mean, we were drawing very well. He created sort of a Stone Cold character. Hurricane Castillo was along that same lines of really a heel, the anti-hero loner, anti-establishment figure. And that was a little before Austin, actually. And then Dutch was really good also at creating stables and factions and sort of bringing it all together in storylines. And one
of the cool, Puerto Rico is a great place to wrestle, and like you said, living down there it's a lot of fun. But I said Dutch doesn't get much credit, but one of the things that also doesn't get much credit is like the Memphis territory. A lot of those guys that came out and went other places, like Dutch, who came from Memphis, started there, and then went down and became the booker in Puerto Rico. Bill Dundee went down and became a booker for Bill Watts in Mid-South. Jim Cornette, of course, grew up in Memphis and then became the booker for Smoky Mountains and all of that stuff. I mean, I think what happened, a lot of guys watched the stuff that they grew up around there in Memphis, and then when they got the job, they sort of translated a lot of the stuff that they had done or been a part of in Memphis into the other territories, and it had never been seen there before.
Exactly. And, I think about the Andy Kaufman angle and how that, really put everything in Memphis on the map as far as in the minds of, wrestling fans around the country, and to this day is so legendary. So there's a lot of cutting edge stuff going on there. Of course, Memphis is a different style, than other places as well. I think there's a lot more entertainment involved in the product coming out of Memphis than there was other places. Other places, treated it as strictly sport. Whereas in Memphis, I believe you got the entertainment value of it, and
why? Because we were booking people like the Christmas Creature and Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street, and we would do all sorts of stuff in Memphis. But you know what?
Great stuff, Jerry. I mean, I'll never forget. Going to the Mid-South Coliseum, and you had that ring and it had the Red Man Tobacco logo in the middle of the ring. And I was watching Eddie Gilbert, and I think he was with you, and he's taking these crazy bumps, and it's just so doggone entertaining. And I'll never forget my first match, just sitting there watching stuff thinking, man, this is just so much fun,
Well, and speaking of entertaining and going with characters more so than like I don't want to say legitimate, but hardcore wrestlers.
Right.
That translated into the WWE as well. If you remember, as a matter of fact, when you started in the WWE, that was at a point when everybody had to be some sort of character, and I think they just ran out of characters, so they just started putting just normal jobs with wrestlers. I mean, remember Duke the Dumpster Drosy? I mean, he was supposed to be a garbage man, and then of course your character, when you came along, you were supposed to be in real life a dentist who turned wrestler. So, I mean, and there were just all sorts of crazy characters at the time. Dusty Rhodes, they made him as, what was he? He really was supposed to be a plumber there and all the crazy things. But how did it come about that they wanted you, that they came up with the idea of you being a dentist?
So I was working in Smoky Mountain, and Jim Ross was on hiatus from WWE at the time. And Jim saw me, of course, big guy, and liked me personally. So he actually got me another tryout with Vince. And that went really well. I had a match against Reno Riggins. Of course, Reno's a very good worker and did a lot to make me look good. So within a week, they called and wanted to sign me to, at that time, just a developmental contract or something, to get me under contract. And I stayed down here in Knoxville for a few more months, and flew up to New York, and met with Vince. And this is a story that I tell all the time. And I'm so happy because I'm going to WWE. I've made it. I'm going to the big leagues. And I walk into J.J. Dillon's office and having small talk with J.J. and Vince comes in, and Vince asked me if I've ever been afraid to go to the dentist. And I said, no, sir. And then he's like, well, I've always had this idea for a wrestling character, a dentist. He goes, Issac Yankem. And then he says, I yank him. And then he does that laugh that only he can do. And it was one of those things where, when you're on top of the world, everything's going great. And then they just pull the rug right out underneath you. And you just feel like you've tumbled down. Cause I'm like, man, I'm a wrestling dentist. How's that going to work? And I just, no pun intended, but I just never could sink my teeth into it. So a lot of, but
Glenn, what I was saying,
of the fit.
Excuse me, but what I was saying was at that time, Vince was really into that. I mean, everybody.
Oh yeah, I mean everybody had these over the top characters, and I was probably one of the last ones.
I remember Dirty White Boy came in. He was like T.L. Hopper.
He was the plumber. Yeah. You had Alex Puerto was the pug. He was a hockey player.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry. That Bill Irwin was the goon. That was the hockey player. Alex Puerto was the pug. I don't know what the pug was. But yeah, everybody had these outlandish characters. And I was sort of the last of those. And like I said, it was just, the character didn't work, and that's mainly on me. I just, I didn't do it very well. And it wasn't certainly for lack of trying for WWE. I mean, I went in my first matches with Bret Hart, which was, a huge deal. But it did get my foot in the door, and, of course, Vince liked me, liked my work ethic and all that stuff. So decided to keep me around. But you say the character didn't work, but I mean, it worked. I mean, as far as I was, involved with it, I thought it worked great. I mean, if you remember, I had the Kiss My Foot match with Bret Hart. Yeah. And so I had to wind up kissing Bret Hart's foot, which, we had gone through all of this buildup where each one of us was, making our feet as disgusting as possible. And so then when I had to kiss his foot, they actually came back, and right after that match, I'm in the back, and they came back they said, we're going to shoot an interview, and you just complain about how bad your, the taste is in your mouth and all this sort of stuff. Well, right before they started doing the interview, I didn't even tell or ask anybody. There were some crackers there left over from the catering. I took several crackers, put them in my mouth, and took a big drink of Coca-Cola, and I had that in my mouth. And as when they started the interview, the camera kind of zoomed in on me, and I'm looking at myself in the mirror, just all disgusted. And then all of a sudden, I just looked like I vomited right onto the mirror. And I think at the time, Vince or somebody thought that I really threw up, and it just, it turned out. It turned out very believable, and it turned out well. And so then you were brought in to try to save my oral hygiene after that. And to me, I thought it worked perfectly in the fact that, here was a guy, a dentist, who was so. I think they used to say that, you were so into the teaching young kids all about their dental hygiene that you let your own teeth become rotten just as an example to these kids to what could happen if they didn't go to the dentist and didn't have proper dental hygiene. And of course, you had the bad looking teeth. And then we did all of those. I loved those videos where the vignettes were great.
Yeah,
the vignettes were great.
You were drilling people. Yeah. They were screaming and all this sort of stuff. They were awesome.
You may think this is funny, McMahon, but it's not. I can assure you there is nothing humorous about this. You know what I mean? Oh, gosh. I want to tell you something. Ever since last night, I have been trying to get this stench, this smell out of my mouth. I thought I had terminal halitosis. Bret Hart, I'll give you credit. Your feet are the smelliest there was, the smelliest there is, and the smelliest there'll ever be. I've even had to come here to my good friend, Dr. Issac Yankem, DDS, and he's been working for the past hour and a half on my mouth, and it's not there yet. Wait a minute. Oh, Bret Hart, you have not seen the last of me. I want to tell you something. You're going to pay for this. I promise you. You are going to pay for what you did to me at King of the Ring. And my good friend, as I said, Dr. Issac Yankem, excuse me, DDS has promised me, once he saw what you did to me, that he is going to extract some revenge himself. Because you see, Bret Hart, before he became the world's greatest dentist, he was also the world's greatest wrestler.
Yeah. Now, the vignettes were great, but the thing was that I think our audience was starting to change at this time. And, you were starting, they wanted something different. They wanted the more serious characters like the Stone Cold Steve Austins. They wanted, the harder edge stuff, because at that time WWE had, really gone, very, very family friendly, very PG. And I think our audience was just changing. And I think that had a lot to do with it as well. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Now, did you go, did somebody come to you? How did you go from the dentist, Issac Yankem, to Kane?
Well, we had in between, we had the fake Diesel character.
That's right.
Yeah. It was, was a product of JR, heel turn on the part of JR, and basically showing that he controlled the product and he could make anyone that he wanted a star. So I had that little stint, and then I was back with you. Actually, I was down in Memphis, and they had this idea. They needed someone to have a match. It was actually a pay-per-view match with Undertaker. And initially they were going to hotshot the whole thing. They just needed a one-match deal for Mark to have an opponent. And what they came up with was, his brother who had been burnt in a fire and put a mask on me and all that stuff. But Vince liked the storyline so much that he didn't want to just do one match. He thought that, he could make a real good story out of it. Thank goodness he thought that way.
Right.
And we were able to.
It's all over. Now we'll come to Tombstone. No. Wait a minute. Oh my God, wait a minute. It's Paul Bear. It's Paul Bear. And that's gotta be Kane. That's gotta be Kane.
So that's really how all that came about. I was, like I said, I was working for you, and never forget, I got to fly back up. I think it was Binghamton, New York, and have a meeting with Vince and talk about it and everything. And then for a while, I didn't know what was going to happen because they sort of put it on the back burner. But throughout the show, that whenever they had Paul Bearer had turned on Undertaker, and he would always talk about Kane, and this went on for 3 or 4 months, I think. And really, by the time that I debuted, they'd already had this story that had so much backstory. I think it was one of the best storylines WWE's ever done.
Yeah, they gave it such a great buildup and took so long. They didn't rush it. It was really laid out well. What were you doing in the 2 or 3 months, while they were building the story up?
I was still working for you. I think I was
Memphis,
a USWA champion. Yeah, I was under a mask. I was Doomsday, a character that I'd been in Puerto Rico. Yep. And then I was USWA champion, traveling around with Dutch and, just making shots, going to Evansville and Louisville and, Nashville and everything.
Yep. The regular old Memphis territory every single week.
Yeah. So
then boom. I mean, was Kane just an instant hit? I think as I remember, it was because like you and I said, they gave it such a great buildup. They didn't rush it.
It was just a character that I just stepped into. I mean, the character was already created in the minds of the audience. And of course, going out the first night and giving Undertaker Tombstone Piledriver to cost him the WWE Championship at the first Hell in the Cell, you can't make a bigger statement than that.
Yeah, that didn't hurt anything at all.
Yeah. And of course, I owe so much of the success of the character to him. I mean, he did so much to make sure that it got over and that it worked. And everybody did really. And I spent it was funny, I was on one of those WWE specials a while back, and they were talking about 1997 and my memories of 1997. And I was like, my memories of 1997 is I pretty much destroyed everybody until WrestleMania 1998. So it was a pretty good run.
Yes, it was. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, and you was talking about The Undertaker. I don't know if there's anybody in the WWE, and Mark's Mark's a very likable guy and everything, but he doesn't, he's not really out there to be, that's I don't know if he's not so open or whatever, but he's a hard guy to get close to. But I think you and Mark are as good of friends as anybody in the company, aren't you?
Yeah, he's a great guy. Like I said, I owe so much of my success to him. And I mean, that's from early on. He worked with me when I was in Smoky Mountain Wrestling and came down, and gosh, you might have even been on this show as well. But, Cornette would bring in big WWE names, and Mark came in, Shawn Michaels came in. I think it was Super Brawl here in Knoxville, and I worked with him there, and he took a liking to me right off the bat, and I think he also saw someone that he could work with
right
throughout going forward, but just helped me out tremendously as far as navigating the waters of the locker room and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, he just actually, just came down, helped me out with my campaign, which was tremendous for him to do. And he doesn't normally do stuff like that. So yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, really. So one other guy, and you mentioned your campaign. I want to get into that really quickly here. But one other guy, too, that was very instrumental in not only yours, but The Undertaker, Mark's career, was Percy Pringle or Paul Bearer.
Oh, yeah.
What a guy, huh?
Yeah, he sure was. The first few years that I was Kane, I traveled with Paul, and he would make all the travel arrangements. I mean, a lot of people probably know this, but WWE takes care of our air travel, but once we get on the ground, we're pretty much on our own. And he would always take care of all my stuff, and that was a huge load off me. I mean, he didn't have to do that. That was just something that he felt that he should do to help me out. And he was another guy that helped me, navigate some of the, just some of the stuff that goes on backstage, some of the politics that you do have to deal with. And we became very good friends, and unfortunately he passed away a few years ago. And the thing is, when I went to his funeral, I'll never forget, there was stuff from all over the world. People had sent cards and flowers, and it was really driven home to me the impact that all of us in WWE have on people around the world. But even here's a guy from Mobile, Alabama, who had become an international superstar. And, that was really, it was bittersweet for me, because Paul was one of those guys, he was old school. He was tough on the outside, but he was a sweetheart down deep. He just had to get through that rough exterior to get there. And I know that he would have appreciated, sentiments coming in from just all around the world, friends of his, when he passed away.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually on the very last appearance. Paul and I made a personal appearance, literally like 2 or 3 weeks before he passed away, and I knew, when I saw him that night, that he did not look well. But you talk about the heart of the guy. I think, and a lot of people don't realize this, but when Paul's wife died, I think that was the beginning. That was the beginning of the end for Paul. He pined and he grieved so much over his wife. He even told me that night something about. He said, "I'm just waiting around till I can be with my wife again." And I think he almost grieved himself to death.
I would agree with that. The thing is, in our business, we're away from our family so much, and hopefully it's so that at some point we can spend a lot more time with our families. And then you get a bad hand like Paul was dealt with Diane, and that can just be crushing. And as you said, they were very close, and he indicated the same thing to me. He was really hurt when she passed away.
Yeah, it was sad. Well, listen, let's talk now a little bit. We're keeping you on here for so long, and I anytime you feel like you have to go, just let us know. But let's talk about what the campaign. This is amazing. Yeah. You're like in, man. I mean, you won the Republican primary for Knox County mayor, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. The general election is coming up in August. It's August 2nd. And winning the Republican primary was a huge step because we are predominantly a Republican area.
Right.
So I feel real good about my chances.
No, let's face it. You're going to be the next county mayor in Knox County, which encompasses Knoxville, Tennessee. That's probably the third largest city in the state of Tennessee, right?
We are, yeah. We're the third largest city, third largest county in the state of Tennessee. The budget's a little over $800 million now, and we have 450,000 people in the county. So it's certainly not a small endeavor.
No, it's not. What I ran for mayor over here in Memphis twice, and I gotta admit, it probably was more of a publicity stunt than actually me wanting to be the mayor. I would have done it, and I think it would have been okay, except for the cut and pay that I would have had to have. But I don't know. I woke up the morning after the election thinking, oh man, that's the greatest thing that never happened to me, when it didn't win. But now you're going to win, and you're going to have to be the mayor. I mean, that's an awesome responsibility. I mean, what made you want to do this, Glenn?
Well, yeah, I've always been interested in politics ever since I was a kid. And, the thing is, I grew up on a farm in Missouri. And when I look back at my life and I think, gosh, how have I been able to do this stuff that I've been able to do? If you'd asked me when I was much younger, I've traveled the world. I've done all these things. I mean, I've been in the ring with some of the greatest performers in the world, not only in sports entertainment, but I've been in there with guys like Drew Carey and Pete Rose and the Muppets. I've been on a Scooby-Doo movie. I've done all this really awesome stuff. I've been able to provide a good living for my family.
And remember when we were on Missing Link together?
Yeah. I've been on game shows. I pat myself on the back. I won a bunch of money for St. Jude's Hospital, Children's Research Hospital on the show. And how can someone like me be able to do all that stuff? And it's because I grew up in a place in America where you have the opportunity to do things like that, where you have the freedom to do that. And I think that's very important. I think the free enterprise system is very important that we preserve that. And, I just want to make sure that my kids and my grandkids now have these same opportunities that I had. And of course, everyone else is as well. I think that's important for our generation to ensure that the next generation, experiences our way of life.
Well, that is great. It's just, I think the term, which is what you're going to be, a public servant, has almost been, I don't know, it's almost been lost. People don't think of politicians as public servants anymore. But that is what it sounds to me like you're going out there to actually do, because you're giving up a totally different lifestyle. And almost in the same way that Donald Trump did. I mean, here's a guy who was a billionaire, a wonderful lifestyle, and gave all of that up to now be ridiculed and made fun of and all of this kind of stuff. But because he's trying to do something that's good for the country, and that's the same thing in your case. I mean, you're giving up a lot to serve the people of Knox County, and you're to be commended for that.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And, it is going to be different. Hopefully it'll be worth it, and I realize that in politics, it's one of those things, no matter what you do, someone's always going to be mad at you. And someone's always going to think that you're doing it for whatever reason, even when you're really trying to do what you think is best. And that will be different. I'm used to being in the public eye, but in a different way than this. Of course, we do know that sometimes wrestling fans can be a little cynical themselves.
Yes.
But certainly not to the extent that it is in politics. And, all the enemies that, you make by trying to do the right thing, which is unfortunate. But I also hope maybe that I can do, a little bit to change that as much as I can, hopefully.
Well, let me just say that it seems that politics, and I'll just say it's almost since the maybe Obama or but definitely Donald Trump, the feelings on I don't remember ever as a kid growing up and then even in early adulthood or anything, I don't ever remember the politics being so vile and it's almost like they just people, if you're on one side or the other, it's so partisan now, and it's almost like they just hate each other on the other side.
Yeah,
and it's so sad.
Super
and
divisive.
If anything you could do to change that, it would be great.
Yeah, it's super divisive. I'll tell you a quick story. My son-in-law is a fan of a certain athlete, and this person was actually had an opportunity to meet with them, and this is right after the election, and I was trying to set that up, and then I guess they heard that I was on like Fox News or whatever after the election, and they told the folks who are trying to set up, like, I can't meet with Glenn because he's on the right and I'm on the left, and I'm going, I wasn't going to talk politics, dude. I just want you to meet my son-in-law,
Right. You're an athlete.
It permeates everything now,
Yep.
and that's sort of what's unfortunate too, is the fact that, we can't talk to each other as human beings. We talk to each other through the filter of conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, and that's unfortunate. So, hopefully I can do something to change that, but I don't know.
Well, I think the major cause, we're a society now that has become a totally a blame society. Everything has to be blamed on something. Nothing just happens. It's everything. There's a root, and everybody has to have a fall guy or something. So everything has to be blamed on something. But I blame this divisiveness on the fact that there's so much media out there. There's so many news channels. And in reality, the sad thing is they're a business, and they're in business to make money themselves, and they make money by ratings and having people watch their shows, and that supersedes the fact that they're out there to what they're really supposed to do is just give the news. A lot of these things now, there's so many stations out there, they create news to try to get ratings and that sort of thing. And I think that's where, we've always been a country too, where, bad news sells better than good news. And so I think they create a lot of the bad news just to get ratings. And that creates a lot of the divisiveness that is out there. Hopefully in the county, as the county mayor, you won't be under such, tight media scrutiny as if it were, a nationwide type thing.
Right. I agree with you 100%. The 24-hour news has really changed everything, and it's become entertainment now. And, the news is a kernel of the truth, but so much of it is just based around, making sure that they're drawing ratings, which you do through sensationalizing things, right, and really causing conflicts that in many places aren't. In many situations aren't there. I really do think you hit the nail on the head with all that. And certainly I won't be under the scrutiny that the president will be under, but nevertheless, I'm right. I'm a high profile guy. So, I already get a little bit of it, which I can use to my advantage, but certainly my political enemies will use against me as well. So,
yeah,
but it is what it is.
I was wondering, did whoever, it haven't happened yet. I mean, the actual, the election is in August. What day actually is it in August?
It's August 2nd.
August 2nd. And I guess probably I was going to ask you, has anybody, do you think they'll try to use your celebrity as a WWE superstar against you? I mean, I always thought that like when everybody knows that Donald Trump came to WWE. He's been inducted into WWE Hall of Fame. But that big match that we had, which was still, to me, to this day, was one of the most fun matches that I ever called. When Donald Trump's hair was at stake and Vince's hair was at stake, and Donald Trump winds up giving Vince a clothesline and gets him down and pounding him. I really thought that during that election they would have tried to utilize that and just made a mockery of him more so than they did. But do you think anything like that will come into play in your election?
I think it would have already happened in the primary. And again, though, the thing about it is, since it's a local election, when I'm actually able to get out there and talk to people, they realize that the wrestling thing and me are two different things. And also, frankly, at this point, we've come such a long way, and we have people like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as the number one movie star in the world, and Lyndon McMahon in President Trump's cabinet. I don't know that the "oh gosh, he's a wrestler" thing. I don't know that has the same impact, negative, that it would 20 years ago, because people now that watch this in the Attitude Era are voters,
Right.
and they think it's cool. And that's what I actually found is the people that weren't wrestling fans, they didn't really care. And the people that were wrestling fans think it's the coolest thing ever. So I actually think that, it's sort of, I'm not going to say that it helped me that much. The celebrity part did, because I was able to get a lot more press. But as far as, I think it actually sort of canceled each other out, the negative and the positive.
Yeah, there used to be a certain stigma associated with being a wrestler, and now, like you said, with the success of The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin with TV shows, John Cena now all over the place with TV and movies, and that you're right. I think that stigma has been taken away, and people are no longer. They don't have a problem associating themselves with a WWE superstar.
I'll tell you a funny story, Jerry. I was out knocking on doors one evening, and this guy, he's an older gentleman. He was in his 70s, and one of my other guys actually knocked on his door, and he's like, "Hey, that's Kane, right?" And so I go over and I'm talking to this guy. Like I said, he's probably in his mid 70s, and it's a Monday night. And he looks at his watch and he goes, "Man, I got to go. Raw's coming on." And he turns around and runs back inside his house. So it was just so funny to drive on the fact that, WWE now crosses every age and every demographic, so it's pretty cool.
Well, you're exactly right. And we want to wish you the best of luck. But like you said, I think you're a shoo-in, and we're going to be you probably won't have time to talk on podcast once you're the actual county mayor of Knox County. But if we can, we'll at least call and get you to say hello to us again in the future, okay?
That sounds good, man. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more time. GM, Glenn Moore, did you have any last questions? You have been very quiet during this interview. I can't believe that.
I've just letting the King and one of my all-time favorite performers, King Glenn Jacobs, talk. But I have a question, and Glenn, if you do, when you win, I mean, I love seeing you on WWE TV, and I know you were at WrestleMania in the Battle Royal, but I mean, how does that impact your wrestling career if you do win Knox County Mayor?
Oh, well, certainly I have to take a much lighter schedule, but we'll see. The future's yet to be written. And I always, people are going to say, you're going to retire. And, the old saying in WWE is never say never. So we'll just have to see.
Exactly right. Now, I think that was one of the things that did work against me when I ran for mayor. I was actually running for the city mayor here in Memphis, and they would ask me that question. Well, when you become the mayor, are you going to stop dealing with WWE? And I would say, look, I only work one day a week. I just go out and I do Raw on Monday night, and I said that'll be my day off from I won't take Sunday off or anything. I'll take Monday off, and I'll go and do my little commentating job, and I'll be back on the job here. And actually, I think that might have been one of the things that did me in on the thing. But I was being honest with him. I couldn't take the cut and pay, to be the mayor and give up a WWE full-time job. But anyway, whatever you decide, like you said, the future is still there to be written, and we want to wish you the best of luck, Glenn. I'm so proud of the fact and so proud of your career that you've had and is still continuing on to be bigger and better. And I'm just proud of the fact that, I was there and Memphis was there a little bit in the beginning to kind of be a part of your start of this great career.
Well, thanks, Jerry. And you certainly were. I mean, you helped me out a lot early on. And that was the place. Like I said, that was the place that I went to, to get some experience, to learn some stuff. You were always kind to me and a wealth of knowledge. So I appreciate everything you've done for me.
Well, thank you so much, Glenn, and best of luck in the future. And ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Jacobs, Kane from WWE, and the hopefully future county mayor in Knox County, Tennessee. So, Glenn, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, Glenn.